I loved my faith and I loved my religion and I thought my faith was unshakable. But all of that changed. I started making a list of all the experiences I missed out on because I was Muslim. I'm 25 and I've never listened to music. I've never been on a date. I've never tried alcohol. I don't know how to dance. I want to take my hijab off. It'll be the biggest decision I've made ever in my life so far, but I'm terrified. I don't know what the consequences could be.
Behind closed doors in this religion, there's just so much people don't know about. Domestic violence, honor killings, sexual assault. I've been physically abused by my parents. They would force me into practicing the religion.
For many, many years, I was feeling that I was drowning in this religion. I couldn't understand how Islam was teaching me to hate myself. Finding this secret group of ex-Muslims saved my life, literally.
The secret ex-Muslim group is definitely a safe space for people who are still in the closet. Being here, speaking about this, it's a risk.
People threaten us, people incite violence, people try to advocate for the killings of us. They want to be a vigilante and come and get us. It's happening in our backyard here in Australia.
I live a 100% double life. I'm pretending to pray, I'm pretending to fast, I talk like a Muslim, I act like a Muslim. But then when I go out, I'm not like that at all. I feel so trapped. I'm terrified of someone finding out that I'm ex-Muslim. I feel like I'm carrying around a ticking time bomb.
For so many years now, I'd heard whispers that there was a secret network of ex-Muslims living in Australia, and it stayed with me. I wanted to understand why it was so difficult to turn away from this religion. So I tried everything I knew, picked up the phone, called every contact I had, left messages on forums, went into the community, and nothing, literally nothing, until this.
Hi Pat, I'm one of the admins of the underground ex-Muslim group. I wanted to organise a time to chat with you before we move forward.
The message I received was from a young woman. She gave me an email and told me to wait for next instructions. It took some time, but this was my way in to the secret network of ex-Muslims. Leaving any religion comes with consequences, but leaving Islam means leaving an entire community, a deeply ingrained culture and a way of life. And breaking those ties may be the hardest thing a believer could ever do. That's why some of the people you're about to meet can't use their real names or show their faces.
My life is on the line for being an ex-Muslim. We're hiding our faces for security and safety reasons. We're not hiding it out of shame. We get a lot of hate and a lot of threats of being killed. It's mostly individuals and sometimes even Muslim leaders. They feel the right to speak out against us and they feel the right to incite violence against ex-Muslims.
Let's call this guy Ahmed. He's a 23-year-old student.
I mean, like growing up in Saudi Arabia, I was happy. I grew up in a really strict family and so I didn't really listen to music. I didn't really watch movies. If my family found out that I'm an ex-Muslim and that I was speaking out so publicly against Islam, I think my family would kill me.
Rushdie is 22. She escaped her family in Pakistan in 2015. In the past 2 decades, there's been at least 68 recorded killings related to apostasy in Pakistan alone. Like Ahmed, Rushdie has never spoken publicly about leaving Islam until today.
I realize that there are definite consequences, but I'm willing to take that risk. I faced immense cultural and religious pressure from my family to be Muslim. They would force me into practicing the religion. My life experiences have been pretty dark, gruesome. I had attempted suicide 4 times.
The reason I can't reveal my identity is because the broader community would 100% disown me. My personal community, my relatives, my family friends, my friends. The idea of someone finding out that I'm ex-Muslim is my greatest fear.
This is Urwa. She's 25 from a Pakistani background. Where Ahmad and Rushdie have already denounced their faith, Urwa is at a crossroads.
Taking my hijab off, it's an incredibly terrifying decision. I'm so afraid of everything that will come after I take it off. I want to do it, but a part of me wonders if I can really go through with it.
Ahmad, Rushdie and Urwa are all part of the underground network of ex-Muslims. Like me, you're probably wondering, if someone stops believing in a religion, why can't they simply just walk away?
It's much more common than people think, and the repercussions are obvious all around the world. I'll take Bangladesh for instance, and many who've been attacked over the last few years because they have professed their non-belief. And you think about Saudi Arabia, where they've declared it a terrorist act to say that you're an apostate.
A brutal murderer hacked to death.
The sixth writer killed in the last 14 months.
From Islam to any other religion, the punishment should be death.
The hellfire is waiting for anyone who is rejecting Allah and His Messenger. Moreover, their families, they should not continue having any kind of relationship with them.
Murad is 46. Originally from Pakistan, he left the UK more than 20 years ago after being persecuted by the strict Muslim community he grew up in. One of few open members of an international ex-Muslim network, Murad now helps guide young Australians conflicted in their faith.
It is written into the Quran about how to treat people who used to believe and now say they no longer do. People get persecuted for that. They're scared for their lives.
There are 13 Muslim-majority nations across the world where apostasy or leaving Islam is punishable by death. Many of the families from these countries now living in Australia raise their children under strict religious rules. Although protected by law and democracy here, the consequences for ex-Muslims can be just as grave.
The extreme Islamist group exists everywhere.
So the threat for you is very real even here in Australia?
I do feel safer here. At the same time, I'm still worried about my life. In my home country, you can get away with murder, rape, domestic violence. And in Australia, apparently, you can get away with death threats without any consequence. This is because extreme Islamist group, the Hizb ut-Tahrir group, came a couple of months ago and openly declared how they wanted apostates of Islam to be dead.
The group Rushdie's talking about is Hizb ut-Tahrir, a controversial organisation that's banned in most Muslim-majority nations. Here in Australia, most Muslims would agree they do not represent the view of the majority. Hizb ut-Tahrir seek to unite Muslims under one Islamic caliphate. Notorious for preaching radical interpretations of the faith, they've been accused of condoning honour killings and advocating for Sharia law to be practiced in Australia.
People think that the danger might be in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, where Sharia law is practiced, but threat and danger exists here in Australia on people who think they carry out justice for God. It's happening in our backyard.
I want to show you something and see how it makes you feel.
Okay.
That's your draft constitution of the Khilafah state. Do you stand by that? Do you want to kill ex-Muslims?
See you shaking your head.
Yeah.
It's the first time Ahmad is seeing this video. It's hidden camera footage from a meeting held by Hizb ut-Tahrir in Sydney earlier this year.
In Islam, it's clear that apostates do attract capital punishment, and we don't shy away from that.
Australian Federal Police were called after Hizb ut-Tahrir publicly advocated for Muslims in Australia to be executed if they leave the religion. The AFP laid no charges. Despite several pleas to have Hizb ut-Tahrir banned, the Australian government allows them to continue operating here. Hizb ut-Tahrir declined an interview but sent a response, including this.
These ex-Muslims who claim to be fearful of Hizb ut-Tahrir are fakes. They are professional apostates, if you will. These people are charlatans who, devoid of an intellectual critique of Islam, choose this path of attack.
How does that make you feel, hearing that?
It makes me really scared to speak against Islam publicly. They always say the same thing, that you should be killed, you should be dead. Those comments always pop up on my Facebook.
If you were born a Muslim, then reject it, you should be killed straight away.
You're going straight to hell if you do this. Apostates deserve to die.
The day will come when we cut your head off, freak infidel.
Where I come from, I've seen people being beheaded in public, on public squares, and it really scares me that those same people are coming here and breaching hate.
It's impossible to know how many physical attacks have occurred on ex-Muslims in Australia. Most go unreported out of fear of repercussions. And that's because this abuse is driven by ultra-conservative interpretations of the faith, rather than a peaceful Islam that the majority practice. When was it that you first started questioning your faith?
Throughout my teenage years, I started questioning the rationality of the religion. I remember being beaten by my father as young as 6 years old. The last time my father was abusive towards me was 2015. He beat me mercilessly. I was sexually molested when I was 7 years old. It continued on for about 6 months. It was a person who identified himself as Muslim. How can I believe in this religion the way that I'm being treated?
Islam condemns all sorts and all forms of abuse. So if someone is abusive, it's because of their character and their nature and who they are as a person. It's got nothing to do with Islam. I can understand how a young person who's trying to find themselves might mix those two things up and then have a bad taste in their mouth with regards to Islam because a Muslim person did that to them.
Sheikh Haitham Faraji is an Australian imam and lawyer with thousands of followers. He's travelled to most Muslim-majority nations to work with other Islamic scholars. He also runs his own unique programs here for young Muslims struggling with their faith. Why do you think it is that so many young people are turning their back on Islam here?
I think there's an epidemic going on of people not understanding their faith. Their parents, they're quite insular, they don't really understand Australia, they probably don't even understand the struggles their children are going through.
So is what you're saying there that the experiences of some of these young people are because they've come from very conservative Muslim families?
Definitely, I think it's coming from firstly a conservative Muslim family and secondly from a family that doesn't really understand Islam. And so whatever happened in their village and their town, they try and implement here in metropolitan Sydney in 2017, it doesn't work. As a Muslim, we're all sinners, each of us sins in our own way. Some people smoke, some people do drugs, some people drink alcohol.
There are Muslims who are feminists, there are gay Muslims.
All sorts of Muslims, all types.
Sheikh Haitham, are you aware that there is a secret group of ex-Muslims living all around Australia right now?
I had no idea until you told me.
You say that abuse is not something that Islam teaches. What I've read from the Quran, that is what it teaches. This is what happens when you rely on a book full of metaphors to define your whole life, that everybody will have a different meaning. Some will have quote-unquote a peaceful meaning, others will have quote-unquote a severe or violent meaning. When I came to Australia and could finally escape, I felt that I finally could go to a place to find help.
That place was the clandestine Australian ex-Muslim network. Rushdie tells me she's been part of it now for almost 18 months. So how many members of the group are there?
I don't think I'm allowed to disclose that information.
None of the members so far are willing to tell me how many ex-Muslims there are in Australia. I'm not really sure why that is, but I'm just on the way to meet one of the gatekeepers, so hopefully she can answer that question. She's the woman who initially sent me that text message. Going by the alias of Awal, she's 24 and the online administrator of the secret network. Just as we're about to begin the interview, Awal gets a message on her phone, but she refuses to show us the text. Whatever it was, it rattled her enough that she no longer feels safe showing her face on camera.
There's a risk involved The thing is, we don't want people to find us. We don't want to be easily accessible. Like, yes, we want us to be out there to support people. There's people who really desperately want to get in contact. We'll find a way. We'll know, because we find these things out. And if they don't get in contact with us, we'll get in contact with them.
Awal is organising a get-together for ex-Muslims later tonight. What happens in the group is what people would wonder.
This is a way to have a support group and to find other people like you. And I guess to find a community outside of your previous community that has probably now shunned you, or if they haven't shunned you, don't understand you. The group is definitely not a space where people can vent out their Islamophobia or their anti-Muslim bigotry or anything like that.
It's Ahmad's birthday, and as well as celebrating his 24th year, it's the first time he's comfortable with both his sexuality and his beliefs, amongst other ex-Muslims.
I couldn't reconcile my beliefs with who I am as a person because I'm gay. Interpretations of the Quran advocate gays should be killed. A lot of it is because of the religion. Some of it is culture, but I think the biggest part of it is religion. I left Islam because I didn't want to hate myself anymore. I wanted to live my life. I wanted to love myself. I wanted to be the person who I am. Us ex-Muslims exist in hundreds of numbers. People who are doctors, teachers, we're just like any other people.
I was born and raised here in Australia. I found a lot of comfort from religion. I prayed 5 times a day. I would fast in Ramadan. I would read the Quran. I really wanted to be the perfect Muslim, but all of that changed. I had conversations with my friends and I realized that there were aspects of Islam that I didn't agree with. After a year of heavy doubt, heavy soul searching, it was like a switch just flipped and I realized my belief had gone. There are aspects of Islam that I do find beautiful, that do have intrinsic value, but I just don't believe that it is divine anymore.
Now, after wearing the hijab for most of her life, Urwa is taking it off.
I feel so many different emotions now that I've taken the hijab off. I still live at home with my Muslim family. They think that I've taken off the hijab because I was sick of Islamophobia on the streets. I was sick of the judgment. I'm terrified of the reactions of people in my Muslim community. I think the best case scenario is getting disowned. It might sound like I'm being a bit dramatic, but I wouldn't be surprised if the worst case scenario is getting murdered.
That is why the ex-Muslim group exists and why other groups exist, because people are supporting each other. There is a worldwide movement of ex-Muslims. For some people it's easier, for some people it's not so easy.
Are existing everywhere, despite you trying to suppress our voices. We're not afraid.
I dream to live in a country where I can say everything in public without people trying to kill me.
Just because we're silent doesn't mean we don't exist, and people need to remember that.
No human being should live in fear. Everyone has a right to peace, everyone has a right to safety, and everyone has a right to justice. And if that's not happening, then myself as a Muslim, I have to take some responsibility, even if it's just in my heart, even if it's just by making prayers, that these people's difficult situations are alleviated.
This needs to be normalised. Leaving religion, leaving Islam is a thing that happens all the time. It happens in private and it needs to be out there, it needs to be spoken about.
I've suffered severely and I don't want others to go through that. I'm trying to accept that I had a difficult past and that I'll have a better tomorrow.
Do you think there might ever be a time in your life when you'll go back to Islam?
Never. There was never going to be a time in my life I'll go back to Islam. I'd rather die.
Rushdi's family practices an extreme interpretation of Islam, so perhaps it's no surprise that she's turned her back on the faith for good. But I can't help but wonder whether Ahmad, Urwa and other ex-Muslims might one day find their way back to an understanding of Allah that they feel at ease with.
When Muslim people are having difficulties with their faith, are having difficulties with the lifestyle in Australia and reconciling that with their faith, they need to seek out someone who's educated in Islam but also understands Australia, also understands the Australian environment.
I want to see things change for ex-Muslims. I want people to feel safe coming out. I would love to see the day that comes. We don't want to be disconnected from our community. We don't want to be disconnected from our family. We're here and we want equality, we want justice, we want love.
I've experienced a tremendous amount of growth as a result of leaving Islam. I went on my first date this year in my entire life. I wore a t-shirt in public and I remember thinking, I've never felt the wind on my skin before. Dancing and music is new to me at 25. This is the first time in my life that I'm really thoroughly appreciating life. If my story can even help one person who's questioning or doubting their religion, then I feel like the risk that I've taken is worth it. I'm just so looking forward to the future.